All right, good afternoon. Just a programming note that on Monday we will have beamed in here the resident coordinator from Addis Ababa, Catherine Sozi, who is not only the resident but humanitarian coordinator for Ethiopia. She will update you on the situation on the ground. We will try to have her by video, but the Wi-Fi is all spotty, so it may just be audio. But she will be, as of now, she will be joining us on Monday. I have a statement on Nagorno-Karabakh. The Secretary General takes note of the December 3rd joint statement on the situation in Nagorno-Karabakh issued by the heads of delegation of the OSCE Minsk Group Co-Chair countries. He welcomes the continuing adherence to the ceasefire in accordance with the November 9th joint statement by the President of the Republic of Azerbaijan, the Prime Minister of the Republic of Armenia, and the President of the Russian Federation. And he calls on all concerned to continue implementing their obligations, notably as they relate to the international humanitarian law and human rights law. The Secretary General underlines that the United Nations is prepared to respond to the humanitarian needs in all areas affected by the conflict and to scale up ongoing assistance in Armenia and Azerbaijan as required. He calls on all relevant actors to cooperate fully with the United Nations entities to ensure their unfettered access. The Secretary General urges Armenia and Azerbaijan to resume negotiations under the auspices of the OSCE Minsk Group Co-Chairs to reach a lasting peaceful settlement. He encourages the governments and the people of Armenia and Azerbaijan to embark on the path of dialogue and to foster regional peace, stability, and prosperity. A note on something I think, James, you had asked me about, which is the situation in the Gulf. And I can tell you that the Secretary General is encouraged by the statements by the Foreign Minister of Kuwait and other reports that the Gulf rift is close to a resolution. The Secretary General welcomes the efforts and contributions of Kuwait in building bridges of understanding in the Gulf region and beyond, and he hopes that all countries involved in the dispute will work together to formally resolve their differences. He stressed the importance of Gulf unity for regional peace, security, and development. And on climate change, as you will recall in his recent speech at Columbia University, the Secretary General called on the major emitters to lead the way in taking decisive action now to get on the right path towards achieving net zero by mid-century, which means cutting global emissions by 45% by 2030 compared with 2010 levels. In this light, the Secretary General welcomes today's historic announcement by the United Kingdom of its new nationally determined contributions with a 2030 target of at least 68% greenhouse gas emissions reductions as compared to 1990 levels. The Secretary General looks forward to all leaders submitting more ambitious nationally determined contributions before COP26 in line with achieving global carbon neutrality before 2050. And at a virtual meeting of the Security Council on cooperation between the UN and the African Union, the Secretary General pointed out this morning that our collaboration with the African Union, as well as the African economic communities and other regional mechanisms, has never been stronger. He commended the leadership and solidarity demonstrated in the pandemic on the African continent. Mr. Guterres also highlighted the important achievements resulting from our cooperation with the African Union, but reminded Council members that the challenges loom large. The Secretary General said our organization and our actions in Africa would benefit from a stronger institutionalization of our cooperation at every level. He also called for more action and to engage women and youth in the peace and security agenda. He reiterated his appeal for African-led peace and counterterrorism operations to receive Security Council mandates under Chapter 7, as well as predictable funding guarantees by assessed contributions. Finally, the Secretary General repeated his appeal for a global ceasefire. His remarks have been shared with you. The Deputy Secretary General of the United Nations, Amina Mohammed, spoke at the General Assembly's special session in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Amina Mohammed said our strategy has three complementary tracks: supporting the continued delivery of health services, responding to humanitarian needs, and supporting national governments with their emergency socioeconomic responses and recovery efforts. So far, she said that these efforts have helped 71 countries implement over 300 social protection policies, supported the provision of water, sanitation, and hygiene supplies to 25 million people, and helped more than 100,000 companies stay afloat. But the Deputy Secretary General added, "We are keenly aware that our response must go further," stressing that the decisions taken over the next 12 months will have impacts for decades to come. And on Ethiopia, following the agreements between the UN and in Ethiopia and the federal government on access for aid organizations, UN agencies are ready to ramp up assistance to people in need in the Tigray region. In the town of Shire in Tigray, the UN Refugee Agency and its partners have dispersed water, food, clothes, blankets, and other supplies to some 5,000 internally displaced people. UNHCR says it's continuing to receive disturbing reports regarding Eritrean refugee camps in the region, with which there are no communications. UNHCR is also in talks with the federal government's refugee agency on logistics on the need to assess the security situation before the resumption of humanitarian activities. For its part, the World Food Programme says its priorities is to locate 50,000 refugees who received WFP assistance in 4 camps in Tigray prior to start of the conflict. The agency says it is possible some of these people may have fled during the fighting. WFP says overall 1 million people have been receiving support before the fighting. It says that the latest violence may have disrupted its existing operations in Tigray and led more people to needing support. More information online. In terms of Sudan, UNHCR said today that more than 47,000 Ethiopians have now arrived in search of safety. A small number of Eritrean refugees have also arrived from the Tigray regions in recent days. UNHCR and its Sudanese authorities have now moved more than 11,000 refugees from the Hamdayet and Abderafi border points to Rakuba camp, 70 kilometers away from the border. UNHCR says many refugees say they prefer to remain near the border to wait for family members who are still in Ethiopia in the hopes that they will be able to return home. But refugees also say they are fearful of more violence inside Tigray. And on Syria, the Secretary General's Special Envoy, Geir Peterson, spoke to the press just a few minutes ago in Geneva, the conclusion of the 4th session of the small body of the Constitutional Committee. He said that a wide range of topics were discussed. While there were many differences, they were expressed respectfully and in a businesslike manner. Mr. Peterson said there are more than quite a few areas where it is possible to see common ground. He and the co-chairs and the small body committee members will return to Geneva for a 5th session at the end of January, 25th to 29th, COVID-19 restrictions permitting, of course. They will begin in accordance with the mandate. Terms of reference, and core rules of procedures of the committee to discuss constitutional principles and basic principles of the Constitution. Bear with me, just a few more updates. This one from Bhutan, where our team there, led by resident coordinator Gerald Daly, has been supporting local authorities in response to the health and socioeconomic impact of the pandemic, mobilizing more than $1 million in extra revenues. UN agencies have been providing cleaning, protective, and medical supplies equipment, as well as support to the government on how to expand cold storage infrastructure for potential vaccines. UNDP is supporting an assessment of the COVID-19 on the tourism manufacturing sectors, while the Food and Agriculture Organization worked with the Prime Minister and the Ministers of Agriculture and Health to communicate the importance of boosting local agricultural support. UNFPA supported the creation of emergency shelters and partnered with goodwill ambassadors, including Her Majesty Queen Mother Wangchuk, on preventing gender-based violence and providing access to safe counseling and reproductive health support. Tomorrow is International Volunteer Day, and in his message on the day, the Secretary General says this year we're highlighting the importance and contributions of volunteers in response to COVID-19. The Secretary General notes that as we gradually recover from the pandemic, volunteers will have a key role to play in accelerating the transition to green, inclusive, just economies. He appeals to all governments to promote volunteering, support volunteering efforts, and recognize volunteering contributions to the achievements of the Sustainable Development Goals. Volunteers deserve our heartfelt thanks, he said. And tomorrow is World Soil Day, and the UN Food and Agriculture Organization campaign named Keep Soil Alive, Protect Soil Biodiversity aims to raise awareness on the importance of sustaining healthy ecosystems and human well-being. Lots more information on that in the the Food and Agricultural Organization's web properties. Celia and then James.
Do missions have an obligation to report cases of COVID-19 to the UN medicals when one of their diplomats is tested or has been tested positive? What are the rules? I heard that mission of Australia and Brunei have cases. Did they report it, and why don't we know?
As you know, we have no authority over the diplomatic community. They're not UN staff, so they're not obligated to report numbers to us. I've not heard of any of the ones you mentioned. Obviously, you would need to contact those permanent missions to get confirmation. We would always appreciate being advised by permanent missions. Many of them, some of them have, when necessary, as it is critical to contact tracing.
There is no rule.
Sorry?
There is no rule.
Well, I mean, Celia, you and I have been around these halls for quite some time. We cannot oblige members of the permanent missions to do anything. We would call on them to voluntarily do so, and also very importantly, keep the New York City health authorities apprised. Mr. Bays.
First, can I check on two things I asked recently? One, have you got an update on Bangladesh and what the situation is? Mm-hmm. These people are being transported. Is the UN now aware that they all are happy to be transported? And any more update on the numbers and the arrangements? And
what was the other question you had?
And the other question from before was about peacekeeping, and particularly Tigrayan peacekeepers, and whether any more had been disarmed or returned home, and whether you had ascertained the whereabouts and safety of those that have already been repatriated to Ethiopia, in particular the Deputy Force Commander in Abyei.
Okay. On the Tigrayan, on the situation concerning Ethiopian peacekeepers, I have no update to what I've said to you, but this continues to be an issue of concern with us, and we've been speaking to various parties, including the Ethiopian permanent mission here. On the other issue of Myanmar, we have heard some reports from the camps that some refugees may be feeling pressured into relocating to the island of Basan Char, or may have changed their initial views about relocation and no longer wish to move. If so, they should be allowed to remain in the camps in Cox's Bazar. And we have also seen troubling images of some distressed refugees sharing during yesterday's relocation process. We have shared those concerns with the authorities in Bangladesh. Our long-standing position, which bears repeating, is that comprehensive technical and protection assessments to evaluate the safety and sustainability of life on Basan Char should take place before any relocation. That's essential for us in terms of providing a way forward for any UN engagement on this process. We have not been involved. And of course, any movement of refugees needs to be done voluntarily and in safety and dignity.
Can I ask you about this morning's Security Council meeting, because the technical problems never seem to stop. And I think it's fair to say anyone watching this morning's meeting would say it was embarrassing to see the Secretary-General having to stop and start his speech, to see the same, the President of South Africa trying to moderate this when the technology was falling apart. Can you explain to us what keeps going wrong? Perhaps can you explain to us who provided this technology to the UN, which country it comes from, which company, how much the UN paid for this software, and whether it was properly stress tested?
Sure. Look, we're not happy with the problems that we've seen yesterday and today, though I think it bears explaining the kind of technical context we're working in, which is the remote participants remotely working, the interpreters working remotely, as well as other officials. The meeting was basically serviced by two different IT solutions, the UN video conferencing system, and then on top of that, a remote interpretation platform. The remote interpretation platform is designed specifically to optimize audio quality to facilitate interpretation in the 6 languages. The combination of platforms has successfully supported previous meetings with some minor issues. As I think there have been very few video calls that we're all on where there isn't at least one minor issue. The Security Council has tested and used other solutions, but determined that currently there's no single solution that would offer a better alternative than the ones we used. And I would add, the complex setting is also with the interpreters working remotely, different equipment, different internet connectivity when we're working with a host of different countries, especially when you're dealing with high-level officials. There will be technical problems. There will be human problems of the human's interaction with technology. And we take every possible precaution in terms of stress testing and testing, but sometimes, unfortunately, problems do happen.
Quick follow-up. It seems to be the weak link in the chain is adds to it is the translation. Why given this is a completely empty building, why do the interpreters have to work remotely? They could come in very safely, socially distanced, and operate from here and have direct interface to the technology.
Well, some do. But, UN staff, like all of us, some people have different home circumstances where they may not be able to travel for health reasons or for other reasons. So we have some interpreters in the building, others don't. The issue when people work from home, there's an issue of internet connectivity. There's an issue of internet connectivity with some of the remote delegates as well. Carla, go ahead.
Thank you, Stéphane. There's an enormous demonstration in India. According to NPR, it's the largest demonstration in recorded history of Indian farmers protesting the neoliberal laws that Prime Minister Modi is imposing upon the Indian people. The poor, the majority, the poor are becoming more destitute. It's hard to define it. And I know you were asked couple of days. Well, first, what does the UN have to say about the fact that these demonstrators are being met by tear gas and the usual repressive measures by the Modi government? And also, you were asked, what does the Secretary General believe in democracy? And so I would ask for, can you define democracy? Because a country which has lifted 800 million people out of poverty is called socialist, whereas India is driving...
Carla, it's a fascinating discussion about what is democracy, how do you define democracy. I think it's more for a graduate seminar. We want to see people have a voice in their lives. As to the question of India, what I would say to you is what I've said to others when raising these issues, is that people have a right to demonstrate peacefully, and authorities need to let them do so. Majid.
I have a question on COVID. all the UN-backed accelerator program for COVID test, treatment, vaccines, all combined have raised around only 10 billion of the 38 billion or nearly 40 billion it needs. How frustrated is Secretary General on this lack of action on the global level with regard to the COVID crisis?
Frustrated is a word that we've seem to be using quite a bit in this briefing room. I would say he would have liked to have seen much more, a much higher rate of investment by those countries who can to the various international facilities for the vaccine. And I think he was very clear in outlining the gap that remains in his remarks to the General Assembly session on COVID-19. He was very clear in thanking those who had given, and very clear on saying that there's more needs to be done. Sorry, I have to. Just way too many ways to communicate with people these days. Sylviane. Zehil, madame.
Yes, did you hear me? Do you hear me?
I hear you now.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Stéphane. The international community, my question is on Lebanon and also on COVID. The International Conference on Lebanon on December 2 expressed concern about the delays in the investigation into the 4 August blast of the port of Beirut. In his report, SG on implementation of Security Council Resolution 1701, the SG stated that there was no progress on the investigation of the massive explosion that occurred at the port of Beirut on August 4. There are numerous calls for accountability, including through important, independent, thorough, and transparent investigation. Any action is there any action be taken by the SG for thorough investigation?
Well, we have always stated, and right from the beginning, to the Lebanese authorities that we are happy to assist and to help in any way should we get a formal request.
But we need a quick investigation. It's been like now since 4 August.
I understand, but Lebanon, Lebanon, like every member of these United Nations, is a sovereign country. The UN can't just go in and investigate without a request, without a mandate, and so forth. But I think the view is that this investigation should be completed as quickly as possible, and it has unfortunately taken a lot of time.
President Macron will be visiting Lebanon on December 20th. Will the SG do the same in visiting Beirut and the explosion site?
No, there are no plans for the Secretary General to travel to Lebanon at this time. And I would add that he is represented very actively by Jan Kubiš, the special coordinator.
But his presence in Beirut on the blast site would be a good message to Lebanon and the Lebanese people.
Okay, noted with thanks, as we say. But there are no plans.
Another thing regarding COVID-19 vaccination campaign, would the SG be ready to be vaccinated? Given the mistrust that hangs over this subject, yes, how can we be sure that the vaccine will be received publicly like the 3 other presidents who will be receiving the vaccine? How can we be sure that this official vaccination is not a placebo?
Well, I think it is very important to combat misinformation. It is very important to take decisions based on science. And in due course, the Secretary General will definitely take a vaccine. Okay, yes, sir.
Thank you.
Hi, Stéphane. I don't know if you talk about that. I'm sorry I came late, but there was mediation of Kuwait and United States between Gulf countries I don't know if the Secretary General...
Yes, no, I said something right in the beginning,
Thank you.
which we expressed, we said we were encouraged by the statements of the Foreign Ministry of Kuwait, and that we welcome the efforts and contributions of Kuwait in building bridges and understanding in the Gulf region. But I read out a longer thing in the beginning.
Thank you.
Okay, unless I see somebody wave or speak up, I will enjoy my weekend because it is Friday, and no one's going to take that away from us. In as much as Brendan may try, yeah. All right, yeah.